Isabel Longoria.
I'm Miss Rogene Calvert.
I think this is maybe the first time I've seen you in person since your appointment. And I want to congratulate you officially. I know you feel like you've been in the job for a while now because you've really been working hard, but we are very happy and proud of you and good to see you there. And it's a pleasure and honor for me to be able to interview you. I understand this will be seen by many people, maybe over and over again. So we'll try to touch base on some really important things happening. So Isabel, there is a lot of discussion on the recent legislation at the state level. SB 1 is what we've called it. Can you briefly tell us what these changes are and how they will affect us in our Harris County? And when will it become effective?
So it's an excellent question, Rogene. And the first part is it will not go into effect until December 2nd, 2021. Okay. And that's because the bill was passed in a special session, and those laws don't go into effect until 90 days after the session ends. So for this November election, for our constitutional and school board election, we will still have drive-through voting. We will still have the open late hours. We will still, and we did, send out applications, mail ballot applications to seniors over 65. All of that stops on December 2nd. So for the runoffs and the primaries and even the gubernatorial election next year, we won't have drive-through voting. We won't have those expanded hours. We won't be able to send mail ballot applications out to residents unless you specifically call our office and request that we print one for you. In addition, that there are some other smaller changes, like poll watchers will now have to go through a state training, which is good, but only election judges will be able to remove them from a poll if the election judge themselves see the infraction that occurred. So a voter, even if you feel uncomfortable with a poll watcher, you have to report that to a judge or to our office. And even then we'll have very limited instances in which case for us to remove a poll watcher. Those are the big ones. There are other smaller technicalities. If you are an assistant or a witness, I speak Spanish and I help my grandmother who speaks Spanish. Some of our viewers might be in a similar situation where they prefer having a family member who can help them translate what's going on. You'll have to disclose what your relationship is to the voter if you're helping them. You'll have to sign an expanded oath saying that you promise not to influence their vote, only to tell them specifically what is written on the ballot. And so it's this kind of very careful, people who are assistants and witnesses will have to be very careful in acknowledging what is helping someone understand what their choices are versus a fine line of someone perceiving that you are influencing someone's vote. And there's dozens of other provisions, but those are more for my office to deal with on the technicalities. I think those are the big ones that will affect the public.
So let me go back to the language assistance, because I think a lot of our audience are going to be members of the Asian American community, many of whom speak an Asian language. And of course, we know that our ballot in Harris County is in 4 languages, one of them being Vietnam, 2 of them being Asian language, Vietnamese and Chinese, which in the print form is both for Mandarin speaking and Cantonese and all the other dialects. So somebody that wants to help someone in another language, the poll, let's say the poll watcher, the monitor, or the poll worker, who is, I guess, auditing it or making sure that they're not violating it. If it's in a different language, how would they know?
They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know unless they speak that language specifically. Yeah. That is a concern that I have, quite frankly, in my office. And I want to affirm the right for all of our voters and our assistants. You have the right to vote in any of those 4 languages because those are the languages we provide currently in Harris County. You have the right to be assisted by your assistant in that language. You do not or are not required by law to translate what you are doing for the sake of someone else. Okay. So you get to vote, you get to receive assistance in the language you want, and you get to carry on voting. Now, you don't get to break the law. So even when speaking other languages, again, make sure you're, if an assistant, you're not influencing someone's decision. You are there only to help them literally read what is on the screen and navigate the voting process. But you have the right to vote and to perform those voting functions in any of those 4 languages, which, as you mentioned, includes Vietnamese and Chinese.
Well, that's a good point you just brought up. What if it's another language. That's not one of the four. Korean, let's say, for example, is a Korean person able to bring someone in to assist them in the Korean language?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A voter, and to be clear, a voter can pick anyone they want to be their assistant. It can be a stranger off the street. It can be their nearest and dearest family member. It is whoever you choose as a voter. And thank you, Rogene. I probably misspoke. We only offer the voting in the written language of English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. If you speak Russian, French, Tagalog, Korean, you can invite whoever you like to be your assistant.
Good.
But those assistants, as they always have to sign in, have to, share who they are so that we can make sure they're not influencing you later.
Sure.
And if we need to find them to investigate anything, we'll know who to reach out to. And that's why, again, they're asking that those people disclose their relationship to you. If it's a family member, if it's a volunteer, if it is, an acquaintance. I personally don't care, but that is the law now. And so you'll have to write, your relationship to the voter.
Okay, good to know, because I think that's a really key part of what we call our voting rights that have been important to our community. Isabel, what are some other changes that voters might see in maybe the November election, the one that's coming up the soonest?
The exciting changes for us are the law, some laws were passed in May and therefore are effective in September.
Okay.
I know that was one of the questions, but for example, we're checking mail ballots. It's something Harris County started last year, but if you return a mail ballot now by state law, you'll be able to go on our website and on the state website and see when your mail ballot was sent to you. You'll find out if it got to you. And then when you return it, if it's been returned, if it's been accepted for the signature, and then later on, if it's been finally counted in the process. And so it gives people clarity, I think, and transparency, because mail ballots, you don't know what happens in the mail sometimes, so that your documents are getting to you and being returned to the office.
That's such a good point. I think the last election, because the mail ballot, I think, was being used a lot, and I even used a tracker system, and I think it was the first time. So there were a little bit rough edges, but I think that's a really great service. How does one access the tracker system? Is it just your website or something?
HarrisVotes.com. Everything we have is on HarrisVotes.com.
So we'll say it again, HarrisVotes.com.
And if you go to our website, the first page is in English, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, I believe, you can select if you'd like to see the information in Spanish, Vietnamese, or Chinese. So the whole website will translate to make it accessible to those four languages. Okay,
that's very good to know. So I heard, and I haven't used it yet, but we got new voting machines. Can you describe them, and what are the changes?
The main reason we got new voting machines is the old machines were, I think, 20 years old, and they were done. You might remember, for those voting, you had the wheel and the button.
Yeah.
They would sometimes spontaneously catch on fire. We don't know why. And it was just time to get rid of them. So Harris County, in February of this year, paid to have touchscreen machines. So these are touchscreen voting machines, which is the first innovation. No more wheel and button unless you're using ADA.
Wow.
The languages, before you had to select one language from the beginning and use it throughout. From now on, you'll be able, in the top of the screen, to select any language you want to use. Again, English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, switch back and forth. So if you have someone translating for you who maybe isn't as fluent, they can switch back and forth. And you'll be able to increase the font size if you have trouble seeing, and increase the font size. A lot of usability features.
That's great.
Big point though, Rogene. You will have a paper ballot. So before it was all electronic, and now you'll receive a blank piece of paper when you check in to vote. You put it into the machine, make your selections, and then you get the printed ballot returned to you. You have to take that paper out, check your selections, and return it to a separate machine called the ballot box scan. Your vote does not get counted unless that paper goes into the ballot box.
Wow.
And you have to submit it yourself. So that is a big switch.
Yeah. So I know one of the criticisms, I guess, of our older system, former system, was that we didn't have paper backup, if I'm correct. Is this piece of paper that I'm putting in the scanner, does that serve as a backup for me?
Yeah, so the paper technically counts as the first record vote, right? So the paper is the vote. And so both mail ballots are on paper, and now the in-person voting is on paper. And don't worry though, on those scans, we have double redundancies so that it's recorded electronically. So if something should ever happen to those papers, we still have double redundancy in the electronic backups to make sure your vote gets counted. But it doesn't count unless you put it in the second box, which is the ballot box.
Okay, well, I hope there's someone at the door that will remind us not to walk. Okay.
Plenty of folks to help. Yeah.
We're not waiting to get that paper back to take with us. That we leave without any kind of paper, right?
There is no receipt.
Up by the machine.
It's stored. It's stored securely by the machine. And yes, that goes from the voting location to our office to be counted on election day.
Okay. And that's a good point. This is not something I thought about asking you, but I figured there'll be some things coming up that I hadn't anticipated. But the other thing I remember is the night of the election, all of the great precinct workers and precinct chairs, their responsibility is to get their ballots over to wherever it's being collected. Does this new machine and new system help that in any way? Because there's always a bogging down that time of delivering it and getting it, counting it. Is that going to help?
The big secret is the counting votes on election night has nothing to do with the machines, really. Old machines, new machines. It's a very quick process.
Okay.
The problem is getting those judges to come back to us. Sometimes the judges, this happens every election. Sometimes some get tired, they want to go to dinner, they stop on the way, which they're not supposed to. But we always get people who get stuck in traffic or stop to get a snack or, are chatting with friends, something happens. And so that is what slows down our election night results, is just getting people to the reporting center on time. So we've got some other projects that we're working on to get people in faster, to incentivize them to come back faster, and to constantly call and check where they are to make sure that they're actually on the way to our office. So
how many precinct judges are there that you have to kind of monitor and make sure how many are we talking about for the county?
Close to 800. So for any election, we have between 700 and 800 election day sites. And so that's between 700 and 800 people who all have to drive to one location. When they get there in line, we've now moved to a drive-through drop-off system for dropping off supplies so that people don't have to get out of their car and walk. You pull up, you drop your supplies, you move on. Pull, drop off.
Oh, great.
Drop off, move on. So we're hoping that'll make it faster as well.
Yes. And so can you drop your ballots off that way too? You don't have to get out, or do you have to walk them in?
Oh, that is just for the judges, not for voters. But yes, they come
that's what I mean.
The drop off. Yeah, they check in with us. So a secure election official receives the equipment, makes sure all the equipment is there that we're supposed to receive, and then immediately takes those votes and equipment into the counting area. And that's where it gets processed for counting.
Okay. Well, that is an improvement, I'm sure, for the precinct judges who've had to, do that. So Isabel, as I mentioned earlier, I think our interview, I hope it will be viewed and listened to by a lot in the Asian American community, a lot of people. What other things can you share with us that might impact our community, that besides the language assistance, which has been there, and of course our ballot being in two Asian languages? Are there some other things that you can share or that you know of that might impact favorably or maybe disfavorably to our community that we should think about?
Yeah, I think the disfavorably is really for us watching the impact of the Senate Bill 1. Not being able to send out applications is difficult. Not being able to offer drive-through voting and late night hours, which we know were in part used more by the Asian American community.
Yeah.
On the positive side, Joanne Ray, as many of you might know, has been our longtime outreach specialist, wonderful partner who's making sure we're staying connected and delivering information. So for us, from the very beginning, someone who speaks the language,
Yeah.
who understands your community, and who is making sure that I am responsive to that at all times.
Good.
She and the Chinese Community Center have worked out a great partnership where, I believe for the first time ever, this year we'll be offering as a voting location the Chinese Community Center.
Wonderful.
Which I'm very excited for on election day. And then we have a voter registration team. I know we mean to parse through that later, but one specifically who we have an outreach coordinator specifically for voter registration in the neighborhoods where we see more often Asian American, especially folks who speak other languages.
Right.
And on top of that, Rogene, it doesn't stop yet.
Great.
We are looking to translate voter registration materials in other languages other than the 4 we have now. And so we're looking at Urdu, for example, some of our South Asian and Middle Eastern languages.
Right.
In the definition of Asian American becomes much more broad.
Yeah.
We are trying to offer languages, not just the statutory minimum by the state of Texas, but what we know is truly used in Harris County.
That's excellent. Just a little well, first of all, I want to do a shout out to Joanne and her colleagues. She has been a great partner for your office as well as for our community, and we appreciate that. And your attention to bringing on diverse and culturally and linguistically competent staff, Isabel, is really key. I mean, we talk about our diverse city, but sometimes we, don't do as good a job as accommodating and really recognizing their needs. So that's a great start. And with Chinese Community Center being a voting site, that's going to be wonderful. Actually, and I've been here a long time. We did have one in Asia Town many years ago in a Vietnamese social service center. And it, I think, was maybe 1 or 2 election cycles, maybe more, but it did get closed or taken away, eliminated, I should say, as a voting site. And so to add this right in the heart of Asia Town is excellent, of which we have Tracy G nearby, Tracy Gee Community Center, which has always served us well. And then the library there, but I think that's probably maybe changed. So
yes,
thank you for that.
I meant to say only our first time in the Chinese Community Center, unless I'm mistaken, Rogene.
Yeah,
but yes, we've been trying to offer more access in Asia Town.
That's absolutely right. And with their improvements and additions to their facility, it will be a good site for people to be able to get in and out pretty easily. So again, thank you for that, because we've been asking for that for a while, and for you to finally accommodate us is wonderful. You said voter registration. Let's go back to that. One of the things that I think we all need to be aware of are some of the key deadlines and dates. So let's start with voter registration. What is the deadline for that?
Oh, I know it's coming up on October. Let me check my calendar. I believe it's October 4th or 5th. I'll have to get you the exact date.
Well,
after this
we'll get at least by the 4th.
That Tuesday,
we should get everybody signed
by
up.
the 4th, yeah, if not the 5th.
And you said you have a team, or you'll have people out in communities. Are they going to be at a site, or are they? How's that working? How does that work?
So it's a team of 20 people, and I'll say before this team, the voter registration department in the tax office had about 3 or 4 people who did really online trainings for our deputy voter registrars. Yeah. And then they said, go find where to be in community. We are taking a more proactive role in that we have hired a team of 20 staff dedicated, who their entire job every single day, every single weekend, every single evening is to go find events in the community. If you haven't seen them at your nearest grocery store or your nearest place of worship or your nearest fall festival, tell us, call our voter registration line, and they would love to be out there. They also now take those, I think we have almost 3,000 voter registrars, deputy voter registrars, volunteers from the community, and organize them as well to come out to your events and to come out in your community, in your neighborhoods. And if we're not block walking already, if we're not phone banking, if we're not doing what we need to, we'll be there soon. But the idea is that team is focused 24/7 on just being with you all, organizing those volunteers and getting voter registration. And we've seen now an uptick in voter registration to the point where we're at, I believe, as of this morning, 2.465 million registered voters in Harris County. And that's, I believe, in the short time we've been here, close to almost 100,000 people that we've registered in the past couple of months.
Wonderful. That's such good news because, I kind of pay attention a little bit to a lot of the political stuff going on, and my fear has been that that's been more discouraging to people. So I'm glad we're making an effort to keep people interested and registered. That's the first step. Now we got to get them out to the polls. But again, having your staff, and increasing the voting sites in places where they're familiar, I think that's going to help a whole lot. So Isabel, this is hopefully an easier question for you because it's personal. You are our first ever election administrator. It's the first time our county has ever gone this route. I know that we've sort of had a division of the clerk's office and then the two offices. Yeah. And so it was always confusing to me, especially who to call for what and all of that. So tell us, as the first ever election administrator, what changes has happened and what should the public expect with this change? And do you feel that it's going to, or these changes, will they enhance, and how will they enhance and increase the public's ability to vote?
I think the most important change of having one office is first having one office. It's one phone number to call. It's one person to hold accountable if anything goes wrong. But the most important for the voter is, I believe before it was very much a minimum obligation because elections and voter registration were never the main focuses of those offices. So now instead of saying, we're meeting the minimum legal obligation as required by the state, we have completely shifted our focus to say, what is our duty to the voters of Harris County? What do I have to do? What hoops do I have to jump through to make sure it's always easy for voters to vote so they don't have to jump through those hoops? That is the core philosophical shift in this office. And I'm proud to say, that came then with a continuation of drive-through voting, continuation of open late, continuation of sending mail ballot applications to seniors, improving our call center. We've made them a permanent call center now. We've opened branch offices across the county. Not enough, in my opinion, but at least to start off with. We've dedicated, like we said, quadrupled the staff who are dedicated solely to voter outreach and voter outreach services instead of the internal technical staff, which we've kept the same. And so again, it's shifting those internal technical staff, and that's only our job to how are we serving the community and the public. You see that again, and I'm very proud that again, we are looking to translate and have started translation committees for 16 other languages other than the 4 we offer now, because it's the right thing to do, because it's how Harris County votes. And so it's that, they might seem like small details, but to us, it's very important to start thinking about the voter and how they vote and how they want to vote, and keep pushing ourselves to innovate and be on the cutting edge instead of, sitting back and doing the path of least resistance.
Isabel, that's such a joy for me to hear because, again, being here for a long time and working in this area, before we had Chinese approved by, to be on the ballot, a group of us had asked the county clerk at the time to allow us to translate some of the more important documents that people use, like instructions on registration and how to vote. And we were allowed to do a few pieces because translation is not easy and it needs to go through a lot of processes of review, as you know, and different people, translate differently. So I guess what I'm saying is for you to increase it by 16 languages is wonderful. And that is, even though it's not officially one of the ballot languages, as we call it, it does help our voters in our community to access and be able to do it much easier and better. So I appreciate that. You earlier just said that your voter registration, you think, has increased about almost 100,000 since y'all went out and started to outreach to people. What percent of those who have registered actually vote? Or is that a number you can give me? Because, like I said, that's the first step is registering. Then we got to get them to the voting.
Our presidential election last year, which is always, the presidentials are always the biggest. We had, I believe, close to 1.65 million people vote, which is roughly 68%. That is the highest percentage of voters we've ever seen in Harris County, and definitely the highest for a presidential. It's a big number. I understand 100% of voters is maybe impractical, but for us, in comparing us to other developed nations, in comparing ourselves to other states, because Harris County is as big as most states, I want to see us get to a point of 90%.
Wow,
Isabel. For us is 70%. And that is for a presidential. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to nerd out just a little, Rogene. When we look at our school board elections, when we look at our local elections, like in Bel Air or West U, Pasadena, Baytown, whatever, Pearland, whatever it may be, if there's not a presidential or a gubernatorial or a state race, we see the percentages drop to 40% in a mayoral race, and then down to 10 or 15% if it's just a school board or a local race. To me, that is what we have to work on, is not just the 68% for the big presidential every 4 years. But how are we getting 68% even for our most important elections, like school boards, like bond elections, which decides how a county and an entity spend our taxpayer dollars, like mayors, like city council, as you well know, Rogene. It's important to think about our local representation just as much as our national representation. So that's why in May, for example, we still offered drive-through voting. We still offered the late night hours. We still offered sending mail ballot applications to seniors, because those innovations were not just for presidential. Those innovations and that commitment to voting is for every election in Harris County from now on. And because of that, Rogene, in May, the average election was about 4% turnout, and we doubled it to 7.4% turnout with that. Now, I know 7.4% is not a big number, but doubling it is phenomenal. And that's what we
that is great. That's a great metric, Isabel. And this is me editorializing, so forgive me, but I think that a lot of people don't know how important the local and the lowest level election is probably the most important, like you say, school board. And these are the people that are spending tax dollars and making decisions that affect us every minute of the day, really. So very good on that. Maybe if I could put a little seed in your mind there, maybe y'all could start doing civic classes, or maybe some education, even through YouTube. So I think people, because schools, because of their priorities and having to put time or dedicate time to different things, civics, government, those kinds of classes have been either eliminated or very shortchanged. Maybe that's something your office could start doing, because I think people don't understand the importance of government.
I love it. I love it. The good news is, for our videos, at least, we have videos that we'll be offering again on social media, and you'll see on our website for how to use the new machines and the new technology, again, in all 4 languages. But you're exactly right, Rogene. My big future plan is how can we offer classes for maybe civic clubs or civic leaders, even neighborhood leaders, to come and learn about how everything with elections work. And let's be honest, there's this question and this lingering conspiracy theory about elections in our nation. The more I can do to educate people, to be transparent, to be held accountable, I think helps people have more trust, not only in their government, but elections. So you're right. That is our future, is how can we make that information more accessible to everyone in our community.
Well, we have a few minutes, just a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you some fun questions or personal. What is your favorite part about your job? What is the thing that you've discovered most that you've enjoyed?
Democracy. I mean, it's such a powerfully meaningful job. I get to make sure that the core pillar of our community, which is free and fair elections accessible to all voters, is functioning properly. And whatever else may be happening in the government, it all starts with free and fair elections. And I'm a nerd, so I'm proud to be hosting that function and making sure it works in our community.
Well, like I said, when we started, you are the best person for this job. You are so dedicated, as you have just said, but it can also be stressful, and especially starting a new area like you have a department or whatever, and starting some new initiatives. So how do you relax, Isabel?
I relax by walking. I like to walk my dog every evening. I go for long walks that exhaust my body so that I can just relieve that stress and let
Fall
go.
in bed. Yeah.
All in bed, exactly. But while I'm walking, I listen to my favorite podcast right now is Stuff You Should Know. So even when I'm relaxing, I'm constantly learning. But at least it's about other things in the world and getting inspired on kind of innovations and how other people solve problems. So that's my way of relaxing, is cramming my brain with even more information.
Well, that is fabulous. Do you have anything that we maybe haven't touched on you'd like to say to the audience before we close?
Please hold me accountable. Please share your information. Whatever innovations we think we're doing, there's a long road to make it even better. So visit us at harrisvotes.com, call our phone number, which again, we have call center folks available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. Anytime the office is open, call us, get the information. Know we are here to be your resource and to be of service to you in whatever way possible.
Thank you, Isabel, and much gratitude, much luck. And we look forward to working with you. And thank you for all you've done and your staff too. So we thank the audience as well.